Hey, NFL fans, welcome to Atlanta Sports Unlimited YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, might be watching on Facebook, could be watching on Twitter. I'm with Tom Pollen, as always, and Chris Mitherman behind the scenes. We have another great episode of NFL Jocks and Pigskins. It's the off season, so we can dive into really anything that listeners might want to. If listeners watching live, send us your comments, your tweets, and we'll get to it during the show. But we're planning to cover Calvin Ridley and his potential trade value on the market. You know, it's not a for sure thing that Ridley will get traded, but I think it is worth diving in. I think it was one of our questions last week. What might he fetch on the trade market? So we're going to dive into that right off the bat here in a couple minutes. And we're also going to return to the Hall of Fame discussion. I missed the episode right after the Hall of Fame class was announced. So I want to hear what Tom has to say, and I have a couple of comments on the Hall of Fame class as well.
Yeah, I'm interested in what you have to say on that.
And, everybody with the offseason seems to be talking about TV and TV deals around the NFL. Amazon entering the ring with a streaming package where they're going to have Thursday Night Football starting this fall. So we're going to talk about, how we feel about that. Neither one of us are real excited about Amazon getting Thursday Night Football.
Nope.
And the impact it's having on the television market, specifically NFL analysts. The price for NFL analysts have just skyrocketed, really starting 2 years ago. But this offseason in particular, some of the contracts that these guys are getting offered are just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I got a few words to say about that too. When we get to the subject, I have a few words to say about that. None of them very good. Let's put it that way.
Have any other teas for the segment later on? Just that you have not positive things to say.
Let's say I'm getting tired of having to keep subscribing to streaming services just because of, television has become so fractured anymore. It's tough to figure out how to watch a majority of games in the NFL every Sunday.
And, more fractured, more niche television is good in one way because you really can pay for what you want to watch. And I think that's the positive of it. Your money isn't going to the Hallmark Channel anymore if you don't want the Hallmark Channel. Nothing against the Hallmark Channel. It's just not my thing. So I don't really want, when you're paying for a television package I'm not an expert in this area, but from what I understand, if you're paying, say, $60 a month for your TV, your TV money, Xfinity or your provider is going to get a big portion of that. But then, a certain percentage, small percentage of that $60 goes to every single channel.
Yes.
With ESPN being the highest, like $2 for ESPN or something. And then Hallmark Channel gets only a quarter or whatever. And all the other channels are in between. But my quarter can be better spent somewhere else because I don't watch Hallmark Channel.
And see, that's where cable kind of went. That's always been their biggest mistake is they've never actually given you more choice among the couple of hundred channels that they offer. They've never given people more choice about how to mix those channels, how to make choices between what they want to see.
Yeah.
I got to a point, I had DirecTV for a couple of years, but because I was enjoying, the NFL Sunday Ticket.
Yeah, sure.
But there was practically nothing else on that I wanted to watch on any of those channels. And it got to be ridiculous after a while. We're get close to paying a couple $100, with the Sunday Ticket a month for this for DirecTV, and it was a big waste of money.
Well, the Sunday Ticket is a whole nother animal too, because you can't get it with any other service other than DirecTV.
No, so but now DirecTV's losing it. And right now, Apple and Amazon Prime are the two biggest bidders for it. So you're going to have your football packages even more splintered than they were before.
I didn't realize that. So is that this season? DirecTV is not going to have the Sunday Ticket anymore?
No, they're not. Unless they do a deal with whoever wins Sunday Ticket, Amazon or Apple would have to sign a contract with DirecTV. If let's say DirecTV goes to a lot of bars, restaurants, and that kind of thing, satellite television.
Yeah.
So they might cut a deal to provide Sunday Ticket to bars and restaurants across the country. And that's how DirecTV would end up still having a foot in the door. But other than that, no, they would not carry the main Sunday Ticket.
Interesting. Okay. I've been a subscriber of the online DirecTV Sunday Ticket for years now. And that's only been offered in select cities and places. Right. So I know not everybody can have that, unfortunately, because that is the best deal, because you're paying for what you want to watch. Again, you're paying for only the Sunday Ticket, and I can have cable with whoever I want. And currently I don't have cable, and I get the Sunday Ticket or the NFL games online, and I stream them, and I stream everything because I don't have cable. So
well, I don't have a smart television, so it's tough for me to stream.
Invest if you can in a Google Chromecast.
Yeah, I have a very well. See, the problem is I'm scraping as far as money goes. It's not easy when you're scraping. When you're an average fan who's just trying to get by, you really don't have too many advantages out there for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. So we'll pause this discussion and we'll resume it a little bit later, because we wanted to kick off the show with Calvin Ridley, and I think the biggest topic around the Falcons right now being what Ridley might fetch on the trade market, and really overall just taking a further step back from Calvin Ridley. What are the Falcons going to do at wide receiver? And for years, wide receiver was a strength for this team. It was just, we knew going into the season every year that like wide receiver is set. Maybe they can find another diamond in the rough and have him be like the number 5 receiver. And arguably they found that with Olamide Zaccheaus a couple years ago. Like he's turned into a pretty decent receiver. And, 2-3 years ago, he was the number 5 guy. Right. And without Ridley, without Julio Jones, I mean, he had to become a much bigger part of the offense. And he's a free agent. Russell Gage is a free agent. And Calvin Ridley potentially getting traded. So, I want to start first with what Ridley might get on the trade market, but also, how hard should the Falcons really try to keep Ridley, because they will have nothing at wide receiver. And if they have nothing, we're looking at mock drafts. You and I, we're poking fun at some mock drafts after the show last week that the Falcons taking wide receiver at number 8. But then you look at their free agents, and like Frank Darby is number 1 wide receiver if everybody leaves. And that's very scary to have that kind of situation.
Yes, it is.
Receiver. So
very much so.
I just said a lot off the bat. Let's focus on Calvin Ridley and how much can the team really needs him back. Like I think the team needs him more than he's worth more to the Falcons than anybody else. And that's kind of a problem when you're trying to get a value back for a trade piece, that he's better on your team than he is on the open market.
Right. Well, let's put it this way. Let me ask you this question. Is Calvin Ridley worth the first rounder?
I think last week I said absolutely. And I stand by that to some extent. I've been reading about it more this week, and Mike Fisher from Sports Illustrated said maybe a 3rd round pick, 3rd, maybe 2nd, I think is what he wrote, and that surprised me. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN said a conditional 2nd round pick that could become a 1st round pick if Ridley performs. That's probably the most realistic, I would say, and the safest bet for a team that wants Ridley but is kind of unsure of his situation. We still don't really know much about what he's going through and if he's through the worst of it or not, or if he's thinking about coming back. We really don't know anything about what's happening with him. And of course, we wish him the best. We want him to get better before we see him on the field. But those questions have to be answered before any team really gives up a first-round pick for him. And I don't think those things are going to be answered before this draft. So you're probably looking at a situation again where you're trading your top receiver in June and you're getting a pick for next year. And I think the Falcons are hoping that it becomes a first-round pick.
That could be the case. I've seen a lot of speculation right now, trading Ridley before the draft. They're talking about, teams that have multiple first rounders like the Giants or the Eagles. But again, if you have multiple first round picks and those first round picks are in the top 10, is Ridley a difference maker, enough of a difference maker to make you pull that trigger to bring him in? I don't think to me, if you're going to draft in the top 10, you got to get difference makers. You got to get guys who are going to Pro Bowl, possible All Pro on your team.
For me, top 10 is too expensive for Calvin Ridley.
Right.
The Eagles have 3 first-round picks. Their worst pick is number 20. If you're the Eagles, I don't think the Giants trade for a wide receiver. They got to figure out their quarterback situation before they're adding more wide receivers.
I think the Giants are going to go with Daniel Jones. That's it. That's why they brought in this coach. That's why they brought in Brian Daboll.
Okay, well then maybe they will want to add a Calvin Ridley type, but I don't think that's. I don't see that. They're also being flirted with adding Russell Wilson in the time, so I don't think that's a realistic. I don't think the Giants are realistic for Calvin Ridley. The Eagles maybe, and the Eagles have 3 first-round picks, and they're picking number 20 is their worst first-round pick. Do you give up 20th pick for Calvin Ridley?
Considering, let's see, the Eagles are picking at 15 and 16, and at 19 is actually their third pick.
Oh, 19. Sorry. The Steelers picked 20th. It was the other Pennsylvania team.
Yes, Steelers picked 20th. Right. I would say with that third first-round pick, you'd have to talk to Ridley first and see how he's holding up and how he's preparing for the 2022 season. But you can get 2 solid starters with those 2 earlier picks and then get a reliable wide receiver. He's not a number 1 wide receiver. That's the problem. I don't consider him a number 1 wide receiver after seeing how he played the first 5 games last year.
My question, though, I agree with you. Should our opinion change that much, though, when clearly he wasn't right at all last year? Did you think he was a number 1 wide receiver going into the season?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, then I think, that's fair to say that, again, now that he's not. But a lot of Falcons fans thought he was last summer.
True.
And I would argue that your opinion probably shouldn't change that much. I think last season just should be thrown away for him, all the stats and everything, because he clearly wasn't right. But I agree with you. Last summer, I didn't really think he was a legit number 1 wide receiver either.
Yeah, so it's, it depends on what you think. I mean, the Eagles could get 2 players that they need, to surround Jalen Hurts and then bring in Ridley as a reliable wide receiver. I mean, no matter where you are in the draft, you're tossing the dice. A third of your first round picks are going to bust. That statistically, that's going to happen. So you could argue that bringing in Ridley for that 19th pick might be a good thing for the Eagles to do, because, and see if I can make this sound right, because you're getting someone who could help Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
You're not getting a question mark. You're getting an actual guy who's produced.
You're getting a proven commodity.
Yeah. And he might not be a number 1 wide receiver, but he is a good route runner. And as I say, could be a good outlet for Jalen Hurts to give him somewhere to go with football. If you're going to give up a number 1 pick, I think maybe the Eagles are that team The Giants, if they want to find pieces around Daniel Jones, they have two picks in the top 10. But the problem is you're asking Ridley to be worth a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the Giants are less likely to trade for Ridley, because you got better options in that area that you can go for. You could probably take a top wide receiver out of college and do better with the 2 picks that the Giants have. The Eagles, I could see actually doing it. If anybody's going to make that pick this year, I think the Eagles can do it. It makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. They make a lot more sense than the Giants. Gary asks, for us to name some teams. So we're naming the Eagles. Another team that I would say keep an eye on is the Patriots.
Yes.
Patriots draft 21st.
Yep.
They have who, as of right now, things will change. But after one season, it looks like they have the best rookie quarterback from 2021. And they want to add pieces to help him.
Right.
And I would agree with you for the same reasons you said about the Eagles and the proven commodity idea. The Rams have kind of proven this over the years. Maybe down the line, the Rams are going to get really old really fast. But
they are.
First round picks or just draft picks in general, kind of overrated. That's how you have to build your team. I get it. But you're going to miss on a lot of draft picks. You can't just trade your whole draft away like the Rams have done. But
some have done that. You see, you're a little young for this reference. George Allen, who used to be coach of Washington, now the Commanders. Yeah, I keep getting Commanders and Guardians. Cleveland Guardians, Washington Commanders.
Right.
So, okay.
So George Allen, he traded for a lot of older, proven veteran players, right?
Yeah. Never met a draft pick he couldn't trade. So, and brought in a lot of proven veterans, and the Rams kind of did that too. What you have to do, though, is you have to get that first-round talent back. If you're going to trade that first-round pick, you have to get an established talent, an established top talent in return, or else you're not making any. You're not doing yourself any favors.
And you have to get young players for those top picks, and you have to manage the salary cap too, because what the draft picks help you do is they come in and they're cheap.
Exactly,
if you're trading away your first round picks for veteran players that are expensive, that adds up to your salary cap, and then you get old fast because if I know Von Miller helped them win the Super Bowl, but that probably wasn't a great trade necessarily because it was only a second-round pick, but he's older. He's not going to be on the team this year, probably. He's a free agent now. So that pick is already gone. But like a Matthew Stafford, even though they gave up multiple picks for him, I didn't ever feel like that was, overspending. And I think, they proved that it wasn't overspending by winning the Super Bowl. But he's a guy that's going to be on their team for a long time, and he's a proven commodity that helped them win right away.
Stafford has always been a productive passer in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And there's never been any doubt about that. So giving up 2 first-round picks and getting Matthew Stafford, you could argue was a positive for the Rams because they knew they were getting someone who puts up over 4,000, between 4,000 and 5,000 yards in the season.
Yeah.
I hit 5,000 yards a couple of times, even with Detroit.
Right.
So you knew what you were getting. Von Miller, I will argue that wasn't a bad pick. It wasn't a good future acquisition.
That's what I'm saying.
But it was a good acquisition because it got you to the Super Bowl and it got you the Lombardi Trophy.
Right.
That's the one thing you saw that the Rams were going through for. The first time they made the Stafford trade, you knew they were going for the Lombardi Trophy this year. There was no doubt about it. So them bringing in Von Miller was kind of an extension of that strategy, and it worked for them. No, it's not going to work for them in the future because they're missing out on a starter quality pick that would have been with them for 5 years before, you have to sign them to big money. But
yeah,
they made the trade with the Lombardi Trophy in mind.
And because they won the Lombardi Trophy, you can say it was a good trade.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But, I mean, if they had fallen short in championship game or the Super Bowl, then we probably look at the trade a little bit differently. But I agree with you that it paid off. They were in win now mode. They went for it and paid off. But I'm just looking at the whole picture, like how you build a team, a franchise.
Yeah, right.
You can't make too many of those trades. Otherwise, you're going to be left with an empty roster.
Yeah. When George Allen was doing that, you didn't have the salary problems, the salary cap, or, once you had a player under contract who was yours for life, unless you traded him or released him. And it's a lot different now in free agency years. You can't quite do that same strategy.
Right.
It worked for him, but it doesn't work for everybody else.
Right.
But, but that's the thing. Getting back to the Patriots, I think it's a positive for the Patriots. You're right, because you've got to bring in somebody who can help Mac Jones. And he looks like he is a legit NFL quarterback. You got to put some pieces around him.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that, the Patriots, that it would be a positive for them to bring in a wide receiver like Calvin Ridley. Again, great route runner, a guy that when he's out, running his route, Mac Jones knows exactly where he's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Jones doesn't have to guess and say, well, maybe Ridley read the wrong route, or maybe Ridley made the wrong read here. No, he's going to go out there and say, okay, I may be looking here, but I know Calvin Ridley, I know exactly where he's going to be when I want to throw the ball. If I need him, he's there.
Right.
And that's a positive.
And there's some history there. I know it was with the previous Falcons general manager, Thomas Dimitroff, but I wonder if that, Bill Belichick working with the Falcons to make some trades in the past, if that makes it a little bit easier to pull off a Ridley trade there. Most notably, the Patriots, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they traded for Mohamed Sanu in the middle of the season. And that was a pretty good trade for the Falcons. They got a second-round pick for that. So a little bit different situation with the Patriots needing the wide receiver in the middle of the season as opposed to the offseason where teams can wait. So I we'll see if Ridley gets even more than what Sanu got the Falcons. But
we'll see. With the Patriots, you got Jacoby Myers, and that's the only real reliable receiver they have.
Yeah.
You get Kendrick Bourne, who did some good things. Got a lot of targets considering being a backup. But Nelson Aguilar has never actually been a reliable receiver.
Right. Yeah.
And I think he dropped a possible game tying catch at one point during the season. I don't remember the exact game, but hands of stone as far as Aguilar goes. So they could really use a Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
So great fit for New England if they want to make that trade.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think the Falcons, would love to get that number 21 pick. We'll see if the Patriots, Belichick, obviously a very smart general manager, smart coach. And I think he might wait to see what the market becomes for Calvin Ridley, because there's no guarantee that he even is a first round pick. And, let's talk about the Falcons wide receiver situation now. They need Ridley back badly because of what I said at the top with Zacchaeus being a free agent. Russell Gage is a free agent. And because of that, and if you lose Ridley too, an offseason after you lose Julio Jones, you're looking at another situation where realistically mock drafts are having the Falcons take wide receiver at number 8. And because of all those losses, that's understandable that you would want to do that. But this team just has so many needs at pass rusher and offensive line and at safety. And it's just like, I would be frustrated that you take another wide receiver in another pass catcher, I'll say, because Kyle Pitts is a pass catcher.
Right.
You took him last year, and I liked that pick. I will say that. I liked taking the best overall player. But what it meant was it meant you had all these other holes on the roster, and those holes needed to be filled now this year.
Yes.
And to have this big hole at wide receiver and perhaps use that at number 8 is just, boy, that would be really frustrating to me as a Falcons fan if that happens.
Yeah, it would, because you can't be the Falcons and have only 18 sacks heading into next season.
Right.
You just cannot do that. They have got to find an edge rusher who can complement Grady Jarrett on the defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Jarrett takes up 2 guys on the defensive line. Somebody's got to take advantage of that. And they don't have anybody who's taken advantage of that in the last 2 seasons. So, Zozo, are you doing all right? She's so restless right now. I guess she's worried about the Falcons wide receiver problem too.
Yeah, and the pass rush.
Right, and the pass rush. But the thing is,
it's not just they had 18 sacks too. Sorry to cut you off. The Eagles were second to last with 29 sacks. They had 11 fewer sacks than every other team in the league.
Yes. It's just incredible. And I mean, you can only do so much with the secondary. The Falcons have a decent secondary, not a great secondary, but AJ Terrell does a great job.
Yeah.
But you can only cover a receiver for so long, is the problem. And then you keep the quarterback, is able to sit back in the pocket as long as he wants. You're gonna get shredded. You're gonna get torn apart. And that's the thing. And that's why maybe getting that first round pick this year before the draft, if they can get it for Ridley, because then they can take a wide receiver and look for a defensive edge rusher, because it's supposed to be a fairly strong draft for edge rushers. I really haven't looked into the draft yet, but last year was weak on edge rushers. This year there's supposed to be some good edge rushers that are coming out that the Falcons could do if they get that extra pick. Because then you could go edge rusher, wide receiver, and then you strengthen the team. Yeah. Then you're coming up with a much better team right away heading into next year before you even sign your first free agent. Well, they'll have done free agency first, but to complement your free agent acquisitions and before you fill out your roster with the rest of the draft, you've really improved yourself then.
The Falcons were, dead last in sacks in 2021. They were 23rd in sacks in 2020 and 29th in sacks in 2019. So, I mean, this isn't just a one-year problem. They were in the bottom half of sacks in the year before that, too, in 2018. Right. So, I mean, they haven't been a playoff team since they had a pass rush. And I'm glad you brought up the edge rushing class last year, just not being regarded as very good. And that's why I liked the Kyle Pitts pick.
Right.
Because, I mean, they needed the edge rusher, but he just wasn't there.
He wasn't there.
At number 4. So you don't reach for that, and you take the best player available. And, that's the classic example of why you do that is what's happening to the Falcons wide receiver room right now. They need a pass catcher, but they already have one. At least one.
Yes.
Kyle Pitts, because you took the best available player last year. Now, this year, you could take the best available player again, but I don't think it's going to be a wide receiver at number 8. I think it's going to be one of these edge rushers.
It'll be one of the edge rushers. But you can get a solid wide receiver later with the other pick.
Yes. Even if they don't have another first round pick, even if Ridley is traded in the summer, I know that won't help this year's team getting that pick, the conditional pick for next year, but you could still find a decent second or third round wide receiver this year. Yes, and then, have 2 first round picks potentially next year to get another stud wide receiver.
Well, see, and what I've always kind of went by is that the wide receivers are always going to be there. You might not get a stud like a Jamar Chase, but your wide receivers are going to be there. You can get some good ones later in the draft.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I wouldn't like say it's a golden rule, never take wide receiver in the top 10 or never in the first round. But I think you're absolutely right that you look around the league at some of the best wide receivers of the last decade. And yeah, you have the Julio Jones and Des Bryants in the first round, but Demaryius Thomas wasn't a first round pick. Antonio Brown was a 6th round pick. Cooper Kupp was a 3rd round pick.
Right, exactly.
So there's lots of, I'm not even talking about serviceable wide receivers. I'm talking about stars. I'm talking about future Hall of Famers that you're finding at wide receiver late in the draft. And it's not like those guys are even aberrations. Like it's routine that stars are found at wide receiver outside of the first round.
Exactly. And that's why I say you don't have to go, well, getting that edge rusher with that top pick, it would be nice to have that extra number 1 pick to take a wide receiver, take up, one of the top ones in the class. But you can get away without doing it. Getting that edge rusher, you've got to get that edge rusher.
Yes.
He's got to be there this year.
Absolutely. And I made this point to you off camera last week too. This is part of why also you hire an offensive coach and you've got Matt Ryan. I know Matt Ryan isn't in his prime necessarily anymore, and you would love to surround Matt Ryan with as much talent as possible and give Arthur Smith as much pieces as possible to work with. Yeah. But if Arthur Smith is so smart and Matt Ryan is so great, they can make do.
I know where you're going with this.
They can make do with what they got.
Right.
The Falcons defense can't make do with what they have right now.
No, they can't.
We've seen it the last few years. It has not worked. They need more talent on that side of the ball. And if you're going to go offense at number 8, it's got to be an offensive lineman so that Matt Ryan can stand up and get it to some of, whoever you got at Kyle Pitts probably is going to be the best pass catcher. I don't think it should be a wide receiver.
No, definitely not a wide receiver. No, and not an offensive lineman. I'm a big fan of taking offensive lineman top, as high as you can get them. But you can get offensive linemen. You can get starters in the 2nd and 3rd round too and do pretty well with that. You don't need to reach for an offensive lineman unless he's a real stud who everybody is projecting to be that kind of left tackle or that kind of thing. You can get offensive linemen in 2nd, 3rd round. You can get wide receivers in later rounds. But getting that extra draft pick in the 1st round, if you can get it for Calvin Ridley, gives you a chance to get one of these other complementary pieces. Because, Matt Ryan's going to be he's 37.
He's going to be 37.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you basically have put your future season in Matt Ryan's hands next 2 years. Matt Ryan is taking up the largest percentage of cap space among all NFL players next
ever.
Season.
He's the highest cap hit ever in NFL history.
Yeah. So, you got to make something work with him, but he can't be on the field all the time like he was last year, selling out his body, trying to make something happen on offense for the Falcons.
Right.
Because, he was really playing physical last year, trying to make something happen for the team, for the offense. And you can't have that. So I would like to see them get the extra 1st round pick this year. You need it this year. You need to be able to take advantage of Matt Ryan. If you're not going to take advantage of Matt Ryan now, and they're probably going to have to redo his contract again, because I think they're still $7 million over the cap, $6 or $7 million over the cap the last I looked. So they're going to have to make some moves anyway. Ridley's taken up $11 million. Can you make a trade?
No, well, they have. I forget what the word is. They're not counting last year towards his contract. He's going to count as under $2 million next year.
Really?
What he counted for in the salary cap last season, he'll count for this year, and he'll have a 5th year. His 5th year option will be next season, 2023.
Ah, okay. Because that's interesting. Because I looked at Spot Rack this morning, and they had him at $11 million. So
I don't think that's what's going to end up being the case. I don't think so. There was a really good article from the Falcoholic that was written in December talking about Ridley's contract, and I was reading it yesterday, and I would just recommend checking out the article. I'm not the best at NFL salary, salaries.
no,
and
I'm not a cap expert, right?
But basically, what it was saying was that because Ridley didn't play a majority of the season, his what is it, void year? He's going to have his contract last year doesn't count towards his contract, and he's under contract for 2 more seasons, which should help his trade value.
Yes,
I mean, he's not going to just be a rental player,
right?
He's affordable this season for anybody who wants to acquire him, and then that team can pick up his 5th-year option in 2023.
Yeah, that's an advantage. That's another sales point. So that's another reason why the Falcons might be able to get that pick this year instead of having to wait a year to get that extra pick. You see, I would say, right now, I would say almost the Falcons are in a rebuild. It's almost like tear it all down, except for the fact that you have Matt Ryan, and you're only going to have him for a couple more seasons.
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, that was the problem last year.
Yes,
that they really should go rebuild. They were refusing to use that word around the team, which is fine. I think they are refusing to use that word because they have Matt Ryan.
Yes,
and they can't move him because of that big cap hit.
No.
But really, yeah, if you look at this roster, you look at how the team performed against the playoff teams from last season, and they're not really anywhere close to competing. That could change this year. I think they're going to be better this year. Arthur Smith's 2nd season. I hope they get some pieces on defense. We'll see how free agency and the draft go. But yeah, they are closer to a rebuild than they're willing to admit, for sure.
Right. The only thing that keeps them from actually saying it is the fact that you got Matt Ryan. And,
yes,
if you can bring in the extra piece this year, bring in the extra piece this year. Don't wait a year to do it. So I think Calvin Ridley might end up getting traded before the draft if the Falcons are going to do it.
Well, what if this is the situation? What if the Patriots say, we'll give you a 2nd-round pick in 2022, or we'll give you a 2nd-round pick conditional in 2023, and if Ridley plays in 14 games, that pick becomes a 1st-rounder? What would you prefer?
Wow.
That very well could be the situation.
Blow my mind, Dave.
I think that's a legit possibility that a team could say that.
Yeah, it's possible.
Because I don't think Ridley is worth the 1st-round pick right now.
No.
I think conditional, yes. I think if he proves that to come back and play like he did before, if he comes back and plays like he did in 2020, yes, I think he's worth that 1st-round pick. A later for a 2nd half of the 1st-round pick. But right now, with all the uncertainties, I don't think the Falcons get a 1st-round pick for him.
Well, as I say, the first thing a team's going to do is interview him and find out where his head's at. And, before anybody makes a move on Calvin Ridley, they're going to want to talk to him.
Yes.
So nothing is going to happen until that takes place anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once the offers start coming in, then we'll get a better idea of where Ridley's head is at as far as heading into next season. We'll be able to kind of tell things without actually Ridley coming out and saying so. I think we're going to be able to imply a few things based on what teams are offering and what kind of interest he's drumming up.
I have another angle that I want to cover from the Ridley situation, but I'm going to tease that and shelve it until next week because we have about 20 minutes left in the show. And if you want a preview of that angle, I actually wrote an article at allfalcons.com yesterday, and you can read all about what I think about what Arthur Blank, what he had to say about Calvin Ridley and why I actually thought that might hurt the Falcons and Ridley's trade value. But we'll talk about that next week. I want to get into Amazon and the Hall of Fame. Hopefully we have time for those two things. I also have to go get my computer laptop charger. It's in the other room. So how about you set the stage for the Hall of Fame discussion? We'll cover that for about 10 minutes, and then we'll end up with Amazon.
Okay, sounds good. I will set the table here for the Hall of Fame discussion. As everybody knows, if you saw me a couple of weeks ago, saw me talking to Mad Mike, I was not thrilled with this Hall of Fame class. I think a couple of guys went in that were questionable to me. I think the Hall of Fame selection committee has created a logjam at wide receiver and at linebacker again. And I could tell you who, and I want to get Dave's opinion on this. What did he think of the class? What did he think of the overall quality? What did he think of a couple of questionable players that went in this time that I thought were questionable? Other people don't seem to think that they're questionable. I thought they were questionable. So, Dave, just give your initial impression of this Hall of Fame class.
I was happy Tony Berselli finally got in.
So was I.
I was happy for I was happy for Leroy Butler. I think
they got okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. You hyped up Richard Seymour, the show before the induction ceremony, and I didn't think he was going to get in, but he did. So I was happy about that. But I didn't care to see Sam Mills and Brian Young. I think those are the two guys you're referencing as the guys that you thought were weaker candidates. I just don't think they're Hall of Fame players.
They're not.
And I think this is really causing a problem. It will cause a problem in the future, because not only because of the log jams that you're talking about that we have at certain positions, but it seems like the quality of player going into the Hall of Fame has been lowered with these two inductions, which means more players are going to be worthy of the Hall of Fame if this is the new standard. And then it's going to be even harder to get in because the standard is lower and more players deserve it, and the same amount of people are getting in every year. I did not care for this class because of that reason. But the other players that were worthy, I was happy for them.
So was I. And I know a lot of people didn't believe Richard Seymour earned his Hall of Fame induction. But as I said in my article, which was on, footballfromatoz.com. So, go check it out. See what I had to say about these guys, and Chris is right on the ball with that. So, so go read it. See what I had to say about them. But, Richard Seymour, the problem is versatility can hurt you because you don't have the counting numbers that people expect to see out of a defensive tackle or a defensive lineman. And Seymour was great going back into coverage. That's the problem. He gets punished because he was also a coverage lineman as well as being just a monster on the defensive line as far as tackles for loss and clogging up the defensive line. So against the run, he's just so seeing Seymour get in, I thought was a positive because I think he earned it even though he didn't have the counting numbers. He had 3 first-team All-Pro selections, 2 second-team All-Pro selections. That means a lot. If you're an All-Pro, that means a lot to me. That means you were among the best in your position of that season.
I think that's more important than any other statistic, especially for defense.
Right.
I don't think All-Pros is as important for wide receiver or quarterback, maybe not for running back. We use stats for those positions, but offensive line and defense, All-Pro means you were regarded as the best player at your position that year.
Yes.
And Mills and Young made one All-Pro team.
Right.
And that to me does not signify Hall of Fame. It signifies Hall of Very Good. You were a very good player, maybe even a great player, but you were not an elite player in your era if you only made one All-Pro.
Right. Exactly. And see, to me, Mills, I love Sam Mills. I love watching him play football. I thought he was a heck of a player. I got nothing against Sam Mills. And I know a lot of people were actually, Mills started out his career in the USFL and made some all USFL teams and really made an impact in the USFL. And they're saying, well, this is the Pro Football Hall of Fame. USFL was a pro league. Mills should be. No, not the same quality.
Yeah.
Yes, you had some stars in the USFL. It was not the same quality. Zozo, will you settle down? So, no, it doesn't. Because he was an all USFL player doesn't mean that makes him equivalent to a Hall of Fame linebacker. When he got to his NFL career. No leading numbers for a single season or career that can be pointed out as exceptional. That was my negative. I still stand by that. I stand by that till the very end. He was not a Hall of Fame player. DeMarcus Ware was a Hall of Fame player. And DeMarcus Ware did not get in because Sam Mills got in. Okay.
Zach Thomas made All-Pro 5 times.
Yes.
5.
And that was my other guy.
And I'm surprised you're not bringing up Devin Hester.
I'll get to him.
Okay.
But, Zach Thomas and DeMarcus Ware are definitely Hall of Fame material. They are going to be in. They have earned it through the measure of their play over the course of their careers. Zach Thomas should have gone in during the extended class of 2020. I don't know what people have against Zach Thomas, other than he only played 8 postseason games.
Who cares? He was not a quarterback. He was a linebacker.
I know, but still, that's the problem.
5-time All-Pro. He made All-Pro in 1998 and then All-Pro in 2006 was his last one. So for 8 years, 9 years at linebacker,
he was one of the best in the league.
Player.
Yes.
Best player in the league.
He doesn't get in is just beyond me. And this was his 3rd time as a Hall of Fame finalist.
Yeah.
And he still hasn't made it in. It's just unbelievable. I mean, DeMarcus Ware, I could see it because DeMarcus Ware was a first ballot. This was his first time eligible, first time on, as a finalist.
Yeah, right.
So I could see if they had taken Zach Thomas instead of Sam Mills. But DeMarcus Ware is going to be there too, ahead of Sam Mills. Mills doesn't measure up to either player. And Bryant, again, was a top 10 draft pick, but never really had the impact of a top 10 draft pick. Yeah, he was very good. There's no arguing. But, he was 89.5 career sacks, and that ranks 23rd among defensive tackles. I'm not rating him as a defensive lineman. I'm rating him as a defensive tackle.
And it looks like, he played in 208 games. He played for a long time. That's probably how he racked up all these sacks. I'm looking at his numbers right now. He only had 2 seasons where he had double-digit sacks.
Exactly.
And he only had 1 All-Pro, as I said, only 4 Pro Bowls.
And was not exceptional as far as tackles among defensive tackles. All right? And that's among his position group. And he was not among the tops, and I know emotionally everybody says, well, emotionally he played with a high engine. But, you still got to get the results. You still got to be recognized. You still got to be recognized as an All-Pro. And it doesn't.
And the other thing, like I just said that it didn't matter for me that, Zach Thomas didn't play in many playoff games. For a position like linebacker, I think I don't think it should hurt your Hall of Fame status if you didn't play in Hall of Fame or didn't play in the playoffs, didn't win championships. But if you did play in the playoffs and have success and win championships, that will only help you. And that to me,
it'll get you the attention.
It should help. It helped Seymour, and I think it should have. I think he was an intricate part of the early Patriots dynasty. Right. And Young played for the 49ers his whole career, and I think that probably helped him because that's a Mount Rushmore NFL team. But he was only on one of their Super Bowl teams, and he was a rookie in 1994. So he wasn't a big part of their success as a franchise either. So how many playoff games did he Thomas isn't getting in because he only played in 8 playoff games. I mean,
I didn't say I didn't say he's not getting in because he only played in 8 playoff games. Okay. I'm saying that's the only reason I could think of.
All right, I see
that he's not getting in.
Well, I'm looking at it right now. Young played in 11 playoff games.
Okay,
so
I can't think of any other reason why Zach Thomas wouldn't get in. There is no other reason. There's just it's inconceivable to me that he's not in.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
And now you got a log jam at receiver because you have Torrey Holt.
Because you didn't put a receiver in this year.
You didn't put a receiver in.
Right.
Torrey Holt, Reggie Wayne, and Andre Johnson as a first ballot, as his first time as a finalist, first time eligible. Andre Johnson is going in. I didn't think so when I first took a look at the finalist list. I started looking at his career. Andre Johnson is just definitely a Hall of Fame quality wide receiver. And how he didn't get in there is just.
I think all those guys are Hall of Famers, the wide receivers you just named.
Yeah.
And I think Hines Ward is too. I got a little bias there. And I don't think Hines Ward should go in over those 3 guys. And that's to me why I'm kind of reserved to the fact that Hines Ward's probably never going to get in because there's this logjam at receiver and he is like 4th or 5th in line. And I wouldn't argue that he should be ahead of those guys. I would not argue that. But I think he's a Hall of Famer and he's going to have to wait a long time for this logjam to get out of the way.
He's actually probably going to have to wait for the Veterans Committee to get to him.
Probably. Yeah. And because, I mean, there's only going to be more wide receivers retiring. Like, how are we going to view Des Bryant? How are we going to view Demaryius Thomas? How are we going to view Antonio Brown?
Right.
Larry Fitzgerald is a surefire first ballot Hall of Fame.
Larry Fitzgerald. There's a no doubt about that.
Yeah. Right. And so I'm not sure what class he would be in. Has he been out of the league just 1 year?
He did not officially retire last year. He always held out the possibility that he might come back, but he didn't. So I don't know if that counts as a year of the 5-year wait.
Yeah.
Or if he's got to wait 5 years from now to be eligible for the ballot. But yeah, he's going in.
If he's in the 2027 class, that class just got even better because that's going to be the Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger.
Yes, is.
Rob Gronkowski class.
It'll be a monster class.
And it could be Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers for some reason retires, he could be in that class too. Yeah, that class is going to be ginormous. But okay, so it's a few years until we get Larry Fitzgerald. But my point being that receivers are continuing to put up these huge numbers. I don't know how the Hall of Fame is going to view that in this passing era. The standards are probably going to have to change at some point. But
you got a selection committee that has never really looked positively on wide receivers.
Well, you watch that Super Bowl. The Rams just had. I know other Super Bowls have had wide receivers be MVP, but I mean, Cooper Kupp was arguably the MVP of the whole league.
Yeah,
I mean, he was the MVP of non-quarterbacks of the whole league,
right?
And then he was MVP of the Super Bowl. I mean, how can you not say that wide receiver is an important position anymore? I mean, it's always been important, but how can you say in today's passing era that it's not a worthy position to consider, even with all the other positions in terms of Hall of Fame?
I agree. But see, I've been thinking that way for a while, and apparently the selection committee is just, they're stubborn. They like what they like. maybe you got too many guys on the selection committee. You need to be,
Kicked
moved
out.
on. Yeah. The game has changed, guys. And, you're not going to put Reggie Wayne in there. Wayne doesn't have the touchdown numbers that some of his peers had, but he was top 10 in receiving yards 7 times, top 10 in receptions 4 times. So, where are you going to draw the line? I mean, that's.
No, he's a Hall of Famer. Andre Johnson's a Hall of Famer. Who's the other wide receiver that was up? Torrey Holt.
Torrey Holt.
Hall of Famer. Torrey Holt.
As I say, Torrey Holt was the best wide receiver on his team. Isaac Bruce wasn't even the best wide receiver on his team, let alone the best wide receiver of his era. And Isaac Bruce went in.
I think Isaac Bruce is a Hall of Famer too. And
all right. But he wasn't the best receiver on his team. Torrey Holt should have gone in ahead of Isaac Bruce.
I disagree there, but I think
I'm going to intimidate you.
I still think Torrey Holt's a Hall of Famer. I'm not going to argue that. We're just arguing who should go in first. Yeah. They should both go in. They could go in at the same time. I don't care. Yeah. Torrey Holt should be in.
So part of that 2020 100-year anniversary expansion class was to get some of these log jams cleared up.
Yeah.
Well, you cleared up some of the log jams. You just created more now.
Right.
You got guys who are going to be sitting out there for a couple of years. And we haven't even talked about Patrick Willis yet, who's also a Hall of Fame linebacker.
That's true. Him. We haven't talked about Devin Hester. We haven't taled about Pat Tillman. Was Pat? No, I'm sorry, not Pat Tillman. Peanut Tillman.
Charles Tillman.
Charles Tillman. Was Charles Tillman a finalist?
No, it was not a finalist. But the thing is, he's one of the greatest turnover experts of all time. I wrote an article about Tillman's qualifications for the Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, that website is no longer online, so that article does not exist anymore. I got to rewrite that article.
Yeah.
Because Tillman definitely qualifies for the Hall of Fame. Devin Hester on the NFL's All 100 team, of the 100-year anniversary, was only one of 2 specialists on that team, named to that team. Only one of 2. Billy White Shoes Johnson was the other one. How do you say that's not Hall of Fame credentials right there?
Yeah.
Leads the NFL in non-offensive touchdowns, which means kick returns, punt returns, and he had 1 field goal return.
Broke Deion Sanders' record.
Right. Broke Deion Sanders' record.
And I believe Rod Woodson is 3rd in that on that list, and Deion Sanders is a Hall of Famer. Rod Woodson is a Hall of Famer.
Right. But they were also Hall of Famers because they're playing cornerback. The problem is Hester did not establish himself at corner, which he came into the league as a corner. He did not establish himself as a wide receiver because the Bears, to extend his contract, the Bears wanted to extend him, but they didn't want to give him big money just to be a return specialist. So they said, you be a wide receiver, we will give you a contract extension for bigger money. Well, that hurt Devin Hester for a couple of seasons as far as his return game. But still, only one of 2 return specialists on the NFL All 100 team, on the 100 anniversary team.
Is he the best returner in NFL history?
To me, yes. He had the best field vision I have ever seen.
There are punters in the Hall of Fame. Not many. I think maybe only one. There's one. There's kickers in the Hall of Fame. So why can't we have
Morton Anderson got into the Hall of Fame just because he was in the league for 25 years.
Because he's the leading point scorer in league history. So
he wasn't a particularly great kicker.
Why wouldn't we want to put in the guy that scored the most non-offensive touchdowns? That is a very impressive stat. And he's number 1 in it. He's not even, 5th or whatever. He's the very best at that, not at the top. So,
Hester knew how his blocking was going to set up before he caught the ball. He knew the route he needed to take before he caught the ball, and he had a top gear that was just amazing. his best punt returns, he was never touched. He was past the coverage before they even knew he was there. If you look at that Super Bowl touchdown against the Colts, they didn't even know he was past them before he knew he was there. I was really disappointed. I think Hester will go in, though. Let's talk about the announcers real quick because I know we got to get to that.
Yes, and before we get to that, I want to mention our sponsor. Sign up for Prize Picks. I know there are no NFL games to place entries on, but there are plenty of other sports going on. And when you sign up for Prize Picks, download the app, use the promo code ASU. You get a 100% match on your first deposit. And yes, we have a first-time commenter here.
Yes.
And I remember the exact game that you're talking about. Devin Hester scored the last Falcons special teams touchdown. Yes, actually, I forgot that it was the last Falcons special teams touchdown, but that is true. That's
the one that gave him the record.
And yes, that's the one that gave him the record. That was a blowout Thursday night game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think week 2 of the 2014 season. And that is a great segue into what we're talking about for Thursday night football in the 2022 season. Amazon will have that package, and part of the salary increase for NFL announcers is because of Amazon. Amazon was trying to get Sean McVay to be one of their analysts, but McVay has declined that he wants to get into TV, at least right now. He's going to remain the Rams head coach, and he got a salary bump from the Rams thanks to that, thanks to the leverage that he was using there. But really, this goes back to 2 years ago when CBS offered Tony Romo a massive contract. I really had no idea that this had happened. I just guess this isn't something I follow very closely, but I was reading about it this week, and Tony Romo makes more than $17 million a season to announce NFL games for CBS. And that has just rewritten that was twice as much as the previous high. The previous high was John Madden was making $8 million at the end of his career. So this just blew up the market for announcers. And now Troy Aikman has been thinking about going to Amazon, and it was reported this week that he's close to a deal to join the ESPN's Monday Night Football booth.
Yep.
And ESPN is reportedly ready to offer him Tony Romo money, which is, north of $17 million, basically.
Oh, close to $20 million.
Well, I read 17.
20 million.
20. Who has that?
I forget who had it. I read it.
So north of $17 million. Basically, he's going to be making $1 million per game that he announces. Yeah. And I guess ESPN is going to be getting more NFL games than just their standard 16 or 17 Monday night affairs. They're going to get more games, and maybe they have 2 booths. But to me, they've had a bad Monday night booth the last couple of years with Steve Levy and Brian Griese in particular. Louis Riddick is, I think, is the best part of that booth. I think Louis Riddick, he interviewed with the Steelers. If he doesn't land the GM job with the Steelers, I think he's going to get a GM job somewhere soon. Yeah. And the best part of their Monday night booth is going to be gone. So this is why Troy Aikman is getting this offer from ESPN, because ESPN is desperate to have a good announcer again for what they believe is the marquee game of the week. I don't think it is anymore, but they want to make it that again. Right. And Troy Aikman is the best way to do that.
But is he?
He's much better than Brian Griese. I'll say that.
All right, but do you watch a game because of the announcers? You still watch the game, even if Brian Griese's calling the game.
I don't know about that. I think there were.
Are you watching the game because of the announcers, or are you watching the game because of the game?
I have not. I did not watch as much Monday Night Football this year, and it was because of the announcers.
Okay.
I despise Steve Levy and Brian Griese. I think they're awful. That Bears Steelers game will go down as one of the worst announced games ever that was in prime time. It was terrible. Brian Griese saying that the Bears should go for 2 when they're down 1 with a minute to go in the game. Or I don't even think it was that. It was They were up by, though the game was tied, and the extra point would give them the lead. And Brian Griese was saying they should go for 2.
I know. I remember that.
The field goal, the last field goal attempt from the Bears missed the post by 8 yards. And
Ridley kept talking like it was imminent that it might go through.
It was a terribly announced game. And I did not watch another Monday night game after that, except for the Steelers-Browns game, which was also vomit-worthy because of how much they went on and on about how great Ben Roethlisberger was.
Yeah, I know.
But anyway, I think I muted part of that game, the Ben Roethlisberger farewell at Heinz Field. And I get what you're saying, and I've read that from a lot of people that this is way too much money to spend for an announcer that people are going to watch the game for anyway. But I think you got to draw the line somewhere, and I'm drawing the line at Brian Griese. I will not watch games that Brian Griese and Steve Levy are announcing. They're terrible.
I just looked it up online. Cowboy new contract, 5 years for $90 million at ESPN.
5 years, $90 million.
Yep.
And that's not definite yet. He hasn't signed it. That's just reported what's being offered, right?
No, apparently that's agreed to.
That's agreed.
It's going to be what he is making, yes.
Did this come out in the last hour?
4 hours ago.
Really?
SI.com.
Okay, wow. I did not see that this morning.
Yeah, 5 years, $90 million. So.
And I don't think Troy Aikman isn't my favorite announcer. I will say that. I think Tony Romo is better than him. But
sometimes I wish Tony Romo would dial it down a bit.
I do think he's a little bit crazy at times with he's just kind of quirky. He's kind of weird. But it's kind of endearing. I think he has really great analysis. And I think he does a good job of teaching you, telling you what's happening, what's going on in the huddle, what the strategy is. I think for me, being a big NFL fan, what I want out of my analysts are, can you teach me something? Can you teach me something new that I don't know? Because there's a lot of X's and O's. I'm not a huge X's. I never played the sport. I'm not an X and O's guy. So there's lots of X's and O's that you can teach me, but I know the basics. I've watched the game for a long time. So don't tell me, the things that I know from playing Madden. And Romo does that. And Troy Aikman, not as much, but he does it to a certain extent. Right. Chris Collinsworth does it. Chris Collinsworth is very good. Brian Griese does not do that. Brian Griese and Steve Levy do not teach me anything that I don't already know. And sometimes they get facts wrong, which is very, very annoying that you can be on Monday Night Football and get things incorrect.
Yes, right. Exactly. You got all week to study for this game.
Yeah. So. I'll reference the game again from the Steelers-Bears Monday night game. The story that Steve Levy told about Najee Harris sleeping on the floor, that was apparently Josh Jacobs' story. That wasn't Najee Harris' story. That was a different Alabama running back. Yeah. That was more comfortable sleeping on the floor in college because he had slept on the floor his whole childhood. Najee Harris tweeted that wasn't him after that game when he heard about Steve Levy sharing that story. How do you get that wrong? Did you not talk to Najee Harris about this during the week? Why are you sharing this story if this is wrong?
Exactly.
If there's any chance that it's wrong, why are you sharing this story?
Exactly. I don't get that. I don't know how they do it. And again, you've got all week to study for this game. That's what Madden used to do on his bus, is study. He studied film. He knew what he was, by the time the game kicked off, he knew what he was talking about.
Sure. Yeah. And for Steve Levy, though, he doesn't have to study film. He's got to he's got to study the history of the players. And clearly I don't know, he got his stories mixed up, I guess. I don't know how that mistake happened. But we got a couple of comments from Larry Orange. Makes me wonder why Tony Romo was so bad at quarterback. Romo was a pretty decent quarterback, Larry. I think he gets more flack than he deserves because he was the Cowboys quarterback. He was quarterback of America's team, and that team wasn't particularly good around him at times. Could have avoided some controversy by not taking Jessica Simpson or whoever it was to wherever they went, some beach island. before the playoff game in 2007. Could have avoided doing that and not been the source of controversy after they lost to the Giants. But I mean, other than that, I don't really have any complaint about Romo as a player.
And some like second string quarterbacks, third string quarterbacks do make good analysts. Being on the field and seeing all of it happen in front of you, you may understand the playbook and why things are happening, but maybe you're not as good at executing it, but you do know what's going on and what they're talking about in the huddle. So
yeah. Let's get to Pantera's comment. Love Romo's announcer. Don't like Aikman. He seems to dislike the Falcons. I haven't noticed that. I do think, I'm not saying that this is necessarily you, Pantera, but I do think that there are a lot of fans out there that think all announcers just don't like their team. I've seen that from Steeler fans for Chris Collinsworth. And Chris Collinsworth played for the Bengals. I get it. He has every reason not to like the Steelers. But I think Chris Collinsworth has been very complimentary of the Steelers organization as a whole and wishes in some ways that the Bengals were more like the Steelers. Maybe, they've got the quarterback now. They'll do that in this next decade, but we'll see. So I haven't noticed Aikman dislikes the Falcons, but maybe there's something there. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think your point about Romo, being a starter, but starting his career as a backup, and maybe that's why he's a better analyst is interesting because, they always say coaches wise that players that weren't all-stars or, all pro Hall of Fame players in all sports, they don't make good coaches because they can't explain what they do. They just do it naturally,
Right.
Like they're just so talented that they just can do it. And they don't even think about what they're doing. And they can't.
Always been the case in baseball too.
Yes. Like Cal Ripken, I liked listening to him because he's Cal Ripken Jr., but he wasn't necessarily the great analyst, the best analyst, because he just, he was so talented. He just did things that came naturally to him. He couldn't really explain to somebody, how to actually hit or actually how to
what he's looking for on that particular pitch or
right.
how the infield's playing and why and what's going on. They don't think about along those lines because they've never seen the game that way.
Yes. And maybe that is part of the reason why Romo is a little bit better than Aikman. I think his personality is a little bit bland, a little bit boring. Joe Buck has gotten better, but I find him bland at times as well. So them together is definitely not my favorite. It'll be interesting to see if Aikman is paired with Steve Levy and he's joined by, Brian Griese, assuming Riddick goes and gets a GM job. Or if it's an entirely new booth, Al Michaels is available as well. He's up there in age. I don't think he's getting a 5 or 10 year contract, but does ESPN get Al Michaels and pair him with Aikman, or does Al Michaels go to Amazon? If you're into media and you're into NFL announcers, this is like the off season for you because all of this movement is really going to be interesting.
Yes, it is. It's just starting. So it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on that as the offseason goes on.
Yeah. I guess we'll shelve the conversation about streaming and our dislike for having to get, Amazon Prime in order to watch Thursday Night Football this year for next week because we're way over time here. But thank you for tuning in and staying with us here late. We had a great conversation. And, tweet at us during the week at TJ Pollen, at DM Holcomb. And we'll be back next Saturday.
Have a great week.